think always nice to have that little voice in the background that says, hit the record button, right? Well, welcome to Getting Buyers and Sellers Off the Fence. And would y'all agree that this is one of the issues, that there's a lot of opportunity out there right now that is just locked up because people are confused. They're not sure, is this a great time? Is it a bad time? Is it a good time to get in the real estate market? And so today, our journey is to arm you with some ammunition to have really solid, constructive conversations with potential buyers and sellers so that we can get them off the fence. We can get them into the market, and we can have a tremendous second and third quarter as we move through this journey of what's 2023. And so I'm going to go to my screen and let me get my PowerPoint up here and share with you kind of what the journey looks like for us today. And let's go. Megan, are we seeing that full screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So let's go to work. And as we get into this journey of getting buyers and sellers off the fence, let's talk about where we're going today. And where I'm going to take you today is we're going to talk about something called the real estate economist consultation. You know, what I'm hearing from top agents, what I'm seeing in my agents is we're spending more time with our buyers and sellers today, educating them about the market, so that when they get stimulated or triggered by all the national media, local media, contrarian stories, on one hand, they hear it's a good time. On the other hand, they think, man, it's a scary time. What about this banking crisis? And so how do we prepare our people? And we've got to slow down, to speed up, spend more time with what we call the real estate economist or trusted advisor consultation. And then the other part is we can't have those consultations unless we get a message out to our database, to our community that indicates what the opportunity of our market is right now. And we combine that message with an offer that's going to invite them in to engage with us. So first, the message has to trigger a thought that maybe this is a good time to get in the real estate game. Maybe this is the right opportunity for us to buy a home, or to sell the home and get in the next home, or make the move we've always wanted to make to the lake. And so the right message, in fact, Gary Keller said it this way. He said, in this market, it's the agents with the right messages that match the market, combined with the proper MOFIR, making offer for immediate response, that are going to win the market. And so not only are we going to talk about the consultation today, we're going to talk about what are those messages that are going to get us to more kitchen tables. They're going to get us in front of people with the opportunity to have that consultation. Because if it's one thing to have a great consultation, and yet if we don't have a way to draw them in to have that conversation, we don't get to move people off the fence. And so we'll go on that journey. And then we're going to wrap up with what I call the perfect pricing conversation. In fact, we've called it over the years the Intelligent Seller's Guide to Pricing, and it was developed many years ago when I was in a market that was in an extreme shift. And it can help you get the right price 95% of the time right from the beginning. And we'll look at some statistics in a little bit and see why that really is important and why it really does matter. In fact, let me do this real quick. So as we get going today, a little bit about Steve Schlueter. First off, I reside in San Antonio, Texas. I'm a bold coach. I'm part of the Keller Williams University Master Faculty. Prior to beginning a leadership journey in Keller Williams, I own a couple of market centers. I've led the early regional development of the Heartland region. When I first joined Keller Williams, I was recruited as a team leader from RE/MAX. I was one of the top 20 RE/MAX agents in the state of Texas. And Gary Keller recruited me to lead one of his offices in Austin, the Austin Northwest Market Center. And in fact, during my tenure there, our team, Real Trends, ranked our market center as the 4th highest producing real estate office in North America for units. And so productivity is my thing, strategy, thinking opportunity. And I trust that we'll be able to bring you some of that today. I'm also the bowl coach that's going to be coming out April 4th to Mooresville. And we'll talk to you a little bit about that opportunity at the end. By the way, all these slides are going to be made available to you. We're going to follow up with you with an email with video of the pricing presentation we're going to go through, the recording of this, all the slides. So if you just want to kind of be present, take it in, take some notes to take the most you can out of this, we'll be good to go. So let me go back to my slides and let's get into this whole journey of being that trusted advisor. So as we get into this game and we're going to navigate this in a way to get more buyers and sellers off the fence, let's take a look at just how we're going to do this. And I want to go here. And some of you may have seen this before. It's called the trust triangle. And it comes from Harvard University. It was part of a study, the conclusion of a study where they looked at leaders and the people they'd led. And they were looking to determine how do great leaders develop trust with the people that they lead. And this is what they concluded. And by the way, when I heard this, I said, this is no different than how a great real estate agent becomes the trusted advisor, the wise counsel, the trusted real estate economist of choice for the people in our ecosphere, our sphere of influence, our geofarm area, whoever it is that we intend to influence. This is how we will make that happen. And so, that being the case, let's take a look at how these great leaders did it, and then we'll apply this to us. So number one, this first point in the lower left, it talks about logic. And the logic part is, I know you can do it. Your reasoning and your judgment are sound. Now, here's the note I want you to make on this. And that is, so what we have to do here, the what in this is we have to have messages that match the market of the moment, that indicate that we understand what's going on. They look to us and they go, this person knows real estate. They understand the market. I should listen to them. So that's what we do. Now, how we do it is our 36 touch campaign, our social campaigns. It's having a vehicle, our conversations that we do in something called DTD2. Now let's go to the empathy side. Now here's what I'd have you write down about empathy. Now, by the way, the empathy point is this: they believe you care about them, their well-being, and their success. And they're not just a number in your database. And so they feel like they feel that you authentically care. And here's the point I would make with this, and I would have you write this down, and that is something that Susan Scott says, because the delivery point of empathy is the conversation. And Susan Scott shares with us a fierce conversation. She says, the conversation is the relationship. The conversation is the relationship. And by the way, in these conversations, we're going to teach you the techniques of how you create that caring and that empathy. And at the same time, you can deliver a logic conversation. You can brief them on the market and accomplish both in a conversation. And here's what else she says. And think about how this applies in our personal life as well. She said, every relationship succeeds or fails one conversation or one missing conversation at a time. And so as we go through this today and we think about some of the conversations that you need to have, maybe you start thinking about every day, maybe a question you ask yourself the night before. And when you're making your list of the things you're going to accomplish the next day, maybe the first thing you write down, write this down. What are the 5 highest impact conversations I choose to have first tomorrow? And maybe you ask yourself that this morning, the day's still young, and what are the 5 highest impact conversations I choose to have first today? And then let's go to the authentic self. And the authentic self says they experience the real you, meaning nothing ever feels like a put on. It never feels salesy. And when you frame how you approach people and being the advisor and being wise counsel and the coming from contribution, and you find that way to do it your authentic self. And by the way, it doesn't matter if you're a high assertive or you're a high social. We all have hangups around calling our database, for example, and a lot of it's behaviorally based. A high assertive like myself doesn't necessarily like small talk. A high social doesn't like rejection. And so we have to find our way to show up being us, because it's critical. See, every single person out there, guys, has got a BS detector, believability scale, right? And they're going, do I believe what they're saying? And if we're not being authentic, people are going to not respond as well. And so we got to find a way to do this, being ourselves, being the real us, showing up authentic and showing up genuine. So as we go into this, I'm going to give you a resource here, because what's the latest thing? And somebody chime in. What's the latest thing going on in economic news that has the consumer confused? Somebody unmute yourself and talk to me.
NAR just came out yesterday with some stats. Aside from the fact that, all of a sudden numbers went up from January to February in terms of sales, and we've had many, many, many months of decline. This was the kicker. 0.2%, the average home value went down.
Mm-hmm.
First time in 131 months.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost 11 years.
Yeah. So
what happened 11 years ago?
Yeah. So, 11 years ago, we're coming out of the Great Recession. Yeah. So, we're just kind of coming through that time. Thanks, Bruce. What else is going on out there, folks, that has the consumer on edge?
Interest rates, banks failing.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that one today, because that's a big conversation about getting people off the fence. What about this SVB bank failure? Did that, because isn't it around the news, and they're going, what does that mean? And are all the banks going to be a problem? And, what I'm always looking for to come from that trusted advisor position is, where can I educate people? Where can I get them a perspective maybe that they're not hearing? And I'm going to give you a resource. And Megan, if you'll put the link in the chat as well, here's a QR code. Grab this, and we'll put the link in the chat as well. This is a podcast. It's called the Pivot Podcast, and the gentleman's a gentleman named Scott Galloway. His sidekick there is Kara Swisher, and Scott Galloway is an NYU professor. This is one of Gary Keller's favorite podcasts, by the way. That's how I got introduced to it. So if you're looking for it to be validated, Scott Galloway also wrote a book called Post-Corona, about what to expect post-Corona. And yet what's interesting, this is the best explanation of what happened with that failing of that bank. And it's a very unicorn situation. Nobody expects really that we've got a chronic banking system issue. There were a couple other issues that came up and got highlighted in the process. And essentially, the banking system is healthy. And yet the more it stays in the media, the more they expected the Fed to not make a move because of the banking crisis, which really isn't. The Fed knew it wasn't, and they went ahead and raised a 1/4 point because they're working to fight inflation, and they went ahead and did that anyway. So this would be a resource that I would listen to, and then I would pass it on to my A-list clients. I'd pass it on to all my clients, and it would probably be something like, hey, I've heard from a few of my clients that, they were concerned about what's this banking thing mean for real estate, and, what's the market going to do? And really, the answer is probably no impact. In fact, this is the best explanation I've heard of what happened. Enjoy this podcast. It really helped shed light on this for me. And now you're putting information, you're demonstrating logic, that you've examined this, you've taken information from people that are knowledgeable, that are good analysts, that have perspective, and they bring on guest experts. And in that particular one, that was an emergency session they did, and they brought in a VC guy, a venture capital person, to talk about what all this really means. And so I trust you'll find that as a resource. And yet, as we go through this shift, like Bruce was talking about, we've got these numbers that when we get into a shifting market, and the numbers tell a story. And I want to go back and look at some numbers around a shift that may be somewhat enlightening. And then we're going to get into the meat of how we navigate all this with our database and our clients. So I want you to take a look at this graph. And now this was Family Reunion 2022. And if you note here on the right end, the projected annual home sales for 2022 at Family Reunion of 2022, so the beginning of 2022, the projected annual home sales was 5.9 million. Now, we had been 6.1 the year before. Well, then inflation started to rear its head. Interest rates started to go up. By the time we got to Mega Camp, the prediction was 5.1 million. So from February to August, the prediction dropped by 800,000 housing units. Now, by the time we got to Family Reunion this year, the actual reported was 5 million. So we dropped from 6.1 million to 5 million in 1 year. Overall, that's still not a bad number. And yet the numbers of a shift, these are lag indicators. You know, what's going on along the way? Let's look at where we were at the end of the year. So we ended with 5 million, and yet the annualized in the last quarter, the annualized housing housing purchases or housing sales, if you will, in December was down to 4 million. November, it was 4.1 annualized, 4.4 the month before that. So may we be this year actually, in the fours, and it's very possible that that's the case. And yet here's the thing, I'm going to give you some good news, and then a choice. Because the other news is really a choice about how we come in and navigate this time and the choices that we make. And so here's the great thing. Even though units are down in many cases, many parts of our country, 30%, and based upon those 4 million projections towards the fourth quarter, pretty much we're going to be down about a third, 25% to 30%. It's still going to be, or projected to be, the third highest volume year ever, because we've seen this escalation in prices. So the opportunity is that although units are down 30%, volume is going to be the third best ever predicted. And yet the challenge is that won't be distributed equally, because here's what happens. And this is a little bit of it's a lot going on this slide, but let me just hit the highlights for you. And this is sides per agent, transaction sides per agent. And, let's look what happened run up to the, to the Great Recession, and the run up to it. Sides per agent went from 13.5 to 7.5, a massive drop, because we added so many agents. 550,000 agents joined NAR. Well, then as we hit the Great Recession and that started to slide, we lost 330,000 agents. By the way, I think we've lost about 80,000 already since we've had our peak, and we're got a clip where we're losing agents. Now, what happened, we started that period at 6.9. By the time we got to 2012, when we were just starting our recovery, it was up to 9.3. So essentially about a 40% increase per unit average. And yet here's the thing, that when you're going through a shift, that doesn't necessarily get distributed evenly. It's the people that really, as Gary said, were the buffalo and charged into the storm, that yield the best return on a shift as those 330,000 agents got out. Now, what happened since 2013, when we hit that period and things started to heat up again, we were at 9.8 transaction sides per associate. And as 580,000 agents came into the business, the sides available per agent dropped to 6.3. Well, here's the interesting thing. We're going through that shedding period again. And the people that lean all in right now with the right activities, building a pipeline, building that trust relationship right now, you're going to be the ones that come out on the other side of this as this begins to go up again and disproportionately go get your share. So I share that as numbers of a shift, because numbers don't lie. And the reason 30,000 agents got out of the business is because there wasn't enough commission pie to support the number of agents that were in the industry. And so our opportunity right now is to make sure that we're getting our unfair share, and it's through going and building this position right now, helping consumers make better choices. So I have a question for you guys, and I want you to go to the chat. I'm going to go pull my chat open. And if you'll go to the chat, I heard you say earlier that interest rates is one of the big holdbacks for the consumer today. What does this mean? What are they going up? Are they going down? Are they going to stay the same? Should I wait? Can we all agree that interest rates are an issue for the consumer? They shouldn't be an issue for us because we know that there's opportunity in every market, and yet they're an issue for our consumer. So I have a very important question for you. And I want you to listen carefully. I want you to put your answer in the chat. And the first thought, my question is for you. Are you an interest rate optimist? Meaning you believe that within 24 months that we will be back at sub 5% interest rates? Or are you a real estate pessimist and you believe that we likely aren't going to see sub 5% interest rates 3-4 years, maybe a decade? You're a pessimist. So put either OPT or PES in the chat and let me know whether you're an optimist or a pessimist. There's no wrong answer. And yet, I want to gauge this. Let's find out where we are. Okay, put them in there. Christy says optimist, but realist and thinking 5 to 6 range. Okay. So here's what I'm seeing so far. I'm seeing it's kind of split 50-50. Now, let me ask you a question. If we've got a likely buyer or seller or somebody who's thinking about making a move, and they ask us about the future of interest rates, if we do this, or do we help them? We just leave them stuck. And so here's the thing. I don't care which one you choose. Take a position and yet look for a way to validate your position. So let me ask you, I'd love for somebody who's an optimist to come on with us if you'd like. I'd love to hear from one of you who answered optimist, and make your case for why you're certain, not you hope, you're certain that within 24 months we'll be at sub 5%. Who would be willing to come on and make that case? Okay, I usually don't get a taker on this one. And let me tell you why. Because you guys are naturally optimistic. That's just who you are, right? And it's just like, surely things are going to get better for people. And, I was in a class the other day and I asked the question and I said, hey, would an optimist, make the case? And somebody raised her hand and she goes, well, I said, okay, so make the case. Well, we've been there before, she said. And I'm going, okay. And what is it just because we've been there before that gives you certainty that we're going to be there again? And she said, well, I guess I don't have certainty. I'm just going, we've been there before. Surely we can be there again. And I'm going, okay. I said, well, let me share with you that I am a interest rate pessimist. And really, as a real estate agent, I don't care because rates are rates and there's a market regardless, and there's way to move people forward regardless of what they are. I just have to take a position so I can help guide people. And so let me share with you the conversation that I would have with somebody. Again, this is part of helping get people off the fence, right? Is if I just do this, they don't know what to do. And if over time I have built a trusted position, and we're gonna talk about how you keep doing that, not just one time, but you keep doing that so that when it's time, they come to you and they ask you and they listen to you and they trust what you have to say. And so I'm going to bring up something that we developed for our agents. Oops, let me go back here. Yeah, let me get the right thing up here. Hang on a second. All right. You see in the housing guide here? I can't see y'all, so I trust we are.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. All right. So I developed this for our agents because they even I mean, we were all struggling with what's the conversation to have with the consumer to help them move forward. And by the way, you're going to get a link at the end of this to be able to download our copy of this, and you're going to have a PowerPoint and PDF. So if you want to take the PowerPoint and edit it for your market, you'll be able to do that. In fact, what we're going to do, we've got Bold coming up there. As we go through Bold, I'm going to work with some of your folks local to get some local data, and we're going to build one for your market. And some of these pages you can take out and use right out of the box right here. So let me walk you through this. So like you said, the first big issue for people today is interest rates. And so the first thing we get into in this consulting guide is interest rates, past, present, and future. Now, you guys probably all know this graph. This came from Gary Keller in his vision speech at Family Reunion. And if you're a consumer, the first thing I'm going to do, and we talked about spending more time with folks, right? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask them questions. And questions like, so what have you been hearing about the market? Get perspective on where they are and what they believe. What have they been influenced by? Because you may have to counter some big influence. You may have to counter a family member who's saying, don't do it, right? And so find out who's in their ear, what's in their ear, what's in their head, what are they thinking? And when it comes to interest rates, I'll move to this page and say, well, let's talk about what's going on. Obviously, the big conversation thing today is interest rates or whatever they say. And can I kind of share with you a little history of interest rates and where it appears we're headed? And I'm going to say this with a lot of certainty because they want certainty. But I'm going to ask them first, what's your perspective on interest rates? I mean, what have you been studying? Tell me about what your thinking is about where we're at in that journey. And it's always important to find out where they are. And if they say, well, I don't really know, I really haven't studied it. Said, well, let me educate you then a little bit, but that'd be okay. And we go into this and say, now this graph depicts interest rates going back all the way back to 1972. And what I really want you to pay attention to is this line going back to 1990, where it says the average mortgage interest rate was just below 6%. So just below 6% and in fact, it was well above 6%. In the early 2000s, it settled in right around that. And then you noticed it had a big shift in 2009. And obviously that was us coming, into the Great Recession. We're in the throes of the Great Recession and they're stimulating the economy. And we didn't really recover from the Great Recession till about 2012, 2013. And so interest rates were kept low to help bring us through that time. And yet they did an unusual thing. They stayed extremely low. We had an average more of 3.8 if you go back to 2012. They stayed, and I'm going to call it artificially low, until we got to 2022. And y'all probably heard that the main driver of what's causing interest rates to go up right now is inflation. And have you heard that? And bring them into the conversation at this point, right? And they'll say, yeah, that's what I understand. In fact, they just raised rates again, didn't they? Yes. Now, it didn't affect mortgage rates so much yet because we're dealing with long-term rates versus short-term rates. They are related, yet not directly. And then I would go back and say, so we know then that inflation is an issue. And so the question I get asked sometimes is, why didn't rates go back up in 13 or 14? We know they went really low because of COVID and stimulus for COVID. Why didn't they go back up as we came out of the Great Recession period? And let me share with you why that's the case. And it's written down here at the bottom. Low inflation pressure followed by pandemic era economic stimulus. Low inflation pressure followed by pandemic economic stimulus. So there wasn't an inflation issue at the time. And let me ask you this, guys, what's the biggest driver of inflation? Who can share with me what drives inflation the most? What is 70% of our economy? So write it down. It's the consumer. So when people have money and they're spending money, it puts pressure on inflation. And the more people you have in peak spending years of their demographics of their life drives inflation even higher, or drives spending higher, which potentially drives inflation higher. And so really the key driver of inflation, people would say, well, it's all the people spending money, or it's all the wage growth. How many of y'all have driven by a Chick-fil-A and you've seen the sign help wanted, and a year ago it said $12 an hour, and today it says $17 an hour? It's there, right? And so you have wage growth that's adding to inflation, more money coming in. You have, and here's the other big issue, and this is where I can make the case, if you will, that interest rates are going to stay elevated. They're going to bounce around a little bit, and yet we're probably near the new normal. And so let me go back and share this with you. So if you look at this slide, now for you folks that are between your 30s and early 40s, and you're in your family formation years, are you spending more money today than you did when you were in your early 20s up to about 30? And I would say, you can acknowledge in the chat that I would say that's probably you're spending more money now if you're in this 31 to mid 40s range than you did when you were in your 20s up to 30 years old. And then as you go through this family formation period and your family is maturing and you've got college age kids and you're buying cars and you got car insurance and vacations and all the things that go along with, having a family, in that 46 to 50, 52 range, this is where economists, now, by the way, this comes from an economist named Harry Dent. And Harry Dent was somebody that Gary Keller had us as leaders in his organization study. He said, one of the things that isn't always a predictor of where the economy is going to go is demographics. There are all kinds of things that happen, but you can't change the demographics. Is who is alive on this planet, in this country, what age group they're in. That is what it is. And right now, he said, when these groups are in their peak spending years, that's when you have the most inflation pressure because they're spending like crazy. Well, why we didn't have inflation pressure was this blue graph down here. And by the way, I'm going to give you a video playlist that explains each one of these pages, how you present it to your consumer. I'm going in more depth with you than I would go necessarily with a consumer. And yet I would be asking those questions, but depending on their age, are you spending more now? Or you realize that now we have the millennials are entering this family formation, period of their life, and they're about to start, the early millennials are going to start hitting their, mid 40s here pretty quickly. And so this blue graph is birth rates lagged 48 years for peak spending. So the baby boomers peaked out in their peak spending around 2003, and their peak spending, the amount of people in their peak spending period has been coming down all the way to where we are today, and it's right in this trough. And so we're in this trough, and the challenge is this trough also represents people that weren't born compared to the boomers, and you have boomers retiring earlier and people not available to fill their jobs because we had the generation between the millennials and the boomer was a much smaller generation. And so this is why you have these signs out there and people can't fill jobs because there's not enough people needing jobs compared to jobs that are available that are being vacated. But here's what's getting ready to happen. Between 2025 and 2037, the millennial is going to be a massive force in spending. Now, this is probably more information than you need to know, and yet you need to know it because this is what's going to keep the pressure on inflation probably for the next 15 years. And so what's going to happen is once it gets at least stabilized, it's going to stay at some elevated level. Maybe it comes down to 5.5 or 5 3/4 or 6%. And yet to keep inflation at bay, it's likely going to have to stay elevated. Now, by the way, every time we have these conversations with somebody, folks, here's the thing that we say. And by the way, there's no crystal ball. I've got no crystal ball. And yet what I choose to be for my clients is a student of all this, and to say, what is most likely? And then I'll ask them, does this seem logical then, that based upon this understanding that the interest rates are likely to stay elevated? And if they then come to that conclusion themselves, and you want them to say it, here's a rule, write this down, something we talk about in bold. Who says it matters? So the more I can turn things into a question, give them understanding, more things I can turn into a question and have them answer the question, the more they take and they own that what am I going to call it? Hypothesis, if you will. So that being said, we've got to bring certainty to this, and we have to have a certain knowing about what it is that we believe, so that they can latch onto something. And when I say there's no crystal ball, now if I missed it completely, and I don't think I have, and I think you agree that this is likely, if we miss it completely, the worst thing that's going to happen is you get to refinance, a couple of years from now at some lower rate. And yet when we see the inflation pressure, to me, it feels like there's more upward pressure than there is downward pressure. And if we go back to this, and this is where you use your consulting guide, is if I go back to this, because we can see the impact that inflation had back when inflation was out of control in the late 70s, early 80s, mortgage rates went all the way up to 16.6%. And by the way, that was the average for that year. They had reached as high as 18%. And you notice they stayed elevated above the long-term norm, which is just under 8%. They stayed elevated above those levels all the way to 1992. And again, that started in the 70s. So we know that the catalyst for this was inflation. We're in an inflationary period again, and it sure feels like there's some pressure there. Now, I'm going to toggle through the rest of this, and then we're going to get to messages and MOFIRS. We deal in this guide in our market with supply and demand. San Antonio, we have a housing shortage. Here's an article, our local business journal, we're 65,000 homes short of a healthy housing market. Here's another one, San Antonio ranked as fastest growing city in the country according to census data. And here's the data down here. One of our suburbs was ranked, highly as well. Get a little further into a Forbes article on why a recession is only going to bring housing prices down so far. And again, I'm going to send you a video guide on how you have this conversation with your database as well. We go through what are the trends. Okay, yes, right now we went from having 3,000 homes for sale to having 9,500. And yet, if we go back to when we had a normal market, that's how many we had then. So we don't have a glut of housing. Our supply side is what we would consider still a seller's market. And yet it's 3 times the choices versus what you had before. And so there's a conversation that we get to have with them addressing, are we overvalued? And of course, this is a slide from Gary. And we make the case here that San Antonio, with its median price well below the national median price, and yet now being one of the most attractive areas of the country to move to, it's likely that we're moving now towards the national average. And so we make that case here, and in the conversation, we talk about the opportunity to negotiate right now because of discounted homes and price reductions and also builder incentives. And then we sum it up right there. So again, you're going to have this in a PowerPoint and a PDF. I'm going to give it to you at the end. You can adapt it. And for those of you going through Bold with me, we're going to build one for your market. I'm going to get some help getting some local stats and resources from you, and we'll build one. And you can take the inflation information, you can take the interest rate information, start putting that to work right now in your market. So let me shift gears. And so the next part is, if we're going to get to the kitchen table, And we're going to get to more kitchen table. We have to work on our message. And let me take this other thing down real quick. Hang on. And what is the message that matches our market? By the way, go back, put full screen here. And by the way, the other market I'm in is the Austin market, which really is overvalued. And so one of the things I did is I started working on the hypothesis of where the bottom is. And we peaked at 510,000 in Williamson County, which is north of Austin. That was in April. We're currently at 410. We've given back 19.6% off peak. And so the conversation, now that's 20%. I suspect we're going to go back 25, maybe 30. I did some hypothesizing that I predict that we're going to be at 418 in January of 2025. So it's less than 2 years to get back to where we are right now. We're probably going to bottom 375, 380 is my hypothesis. And again, I'm going to bring certainty to people. Now, I said, by the time we know we're there and we're swinging the other direction, the challenge is you don't know it's happened until it's lagged 60 days or 90 days. And this is something that actually comes out of page 174 in the shift book. I believe it's 170, get the eyes on 172 in the shift book. And Gary talks about timing the market. And this is an interesting conversation with somebody because I believe that your markets are in the safe zone right now. And when a market peaks, it's hard to time a real estate market. And when it peaks, you were just kind of in the unlucky zone. Nobody really sees it because there's usually some factor that tilts the market, and we don't see the after effects for maybe a quarter. And so this yellow star is the point of realization that the market has shifted. And so if we think about this, well, we realize it's really going down as it was going down. And then as it hits bottom and starts to move up, well, we don't even realize it until it's really begun that move. And by the way, my history of having been through 5 shifting markets is that when it swings violently and fast. And that's for going up as much as it is for going down. And I would say with your markets, you're easily probably somewhere in here. I would say you're in the safe zone. Now, if you want to wait and get in the lucky zone when it's bottom, most people miss it because we don't know it until it is tilted and shifted the other way. And when we've got that lag evidence that says that's true. So this becomes a powerful consulting conversation for a market like you have right now. But let's look at your market and let's figure out some of the messages that would match your market right now. So let's take a look at this one, and this is Cornelius. Now, I know you have all kinds of submarkets around you, and I just took a sampling, and let's take a look at what's going on. So Cornelius, you're at a median price today of $525,000. Your home sold 45. You're actually year over year up, and you peaked on median price at $573,000 in June. So you're off peak right now of 8.4%. Most economists felt like strong markets like yours wouldn't be off more than 10%. So you're in my mind, highly in the safe zone. Then let's take a look at this other factor. Now here's an interesting item. May of 2022, homes sold for 104.5% of list price. And by the way, today, only 22.2% are selling above list. The average now is 98%. So look at the delta from 104.5 to 98. And so what might be the message right there? Breathing room for buyers? I mean, you can think about, there's a message in there that really can attract a buyer and get them off the fence. Less craziness, right? Less likely to overpay. Let's go take a look at Mooresville. So Mooresville, 470,000 was your peak June of 2022. You're currently at 525, 9.6% off peak, clearly in the safe zone. Now, by the way, look at this number. we looked at those NAR numbers, and if you don't think being off 30% isn't real, your stat for February down 36% for homes sold. So that's a real deal. Your stat here, only 10.5% of the homes sold above list price. 34% of your homes have had a price drop, meaning we're missing initial pricing from the beginning. And the delta between where you were in May of 103.8% list and today is 97.9. So that's over a 6% spread right there. That's a nice number to be able to say to a buyer, it's not insanity right now. And now how that affects the seller, sellers are, they're going to be more needs-based sellers today. And yet we're going to give them the confidence to make a good decision and, not be the ones that are price reduced, and how do they get in the market? So let's just look at this for a second. So what are some possible MOFIRs that match your market? Messages that match your market. Buyers get breathing room. So you can base that based on your list to sales price ratio. One of the most stable markets in the U.S. and North Carolina. Compared to other markets, you guys are extremely stable. Affordability. There was in your business journal, I get journal for the whole country. In your business journal, they're talking about building affordable housing stock, meaning going a lot of townhomes and things of this nature that are on the books. These would be some things you could build some interest around, maybe particularly around first-time home buyers. Start looking at assistance programs. There's liable to be some first-time buyer bond money being issued before too long. And the big one for first-time home buyers, less competition right now. Now, what we do know is that the top 20 or 30% of listings are going to get multiple offers. Maybe they're going to get above list. One of the stats to watch is the days on market on the aging inventory, because that tells another story. What are people saying no to, causing them to have those price reductions, and to ultimately get sold. Housing shortage, the law of supply and demand. You guys still have housing supply issues. And the future of interest rates. What will drive rates, and start a conversation about why it might be the best time interest rate environment that we might see in the next, half dozen years. And so a MOFIR, so whatever your message is, you're going to build your message to match your market, give some specific examples. And the MOFIR is kind of my go-to MOFIR with my people today is this. If you have any possible interest in buying or selling a home in the next 12 to 24 months, find out where the right time for you might be right now. Call me to schedule a no obligation strategy session. So message and MOFIRs, find your messages that match your market, get it out there and put it to work so that we get to more kitchen tables. People may not know if they're ready or not ready. Yes, are they ready to be educated, and are they ready to be informed? So before I go into the next piece, give me a little bit of feedback. What'd you hear? Because I want to talk about sellers for a second. The sellers section I'm going to go through very shortly, and then I'm going to send you a video in depth on how we do what we're going to talk about, because it's really something that warrants about a 30-minute conversation, and we don't have 30 minutes. But what did you hear in this first section that is resonating with you?
Well, Steve, I love that, if we can take away their fear and give them confidence, then it's at that moment that they'll be able to make an educated decision. If they're all going, what's happening with interest rates? What's going on with prices? And if we can come to the table with data, to support it, and our own personal confidence, use my confidence, let's make a decision.
Yeah. Well, that's right. They're gonna follow your, and if your energy is uncertain, they'll be uncertain. And Gary Keller said this a while back. Thank you, Bruce. He said, leaders are certain in uncertain times, even when they are uncertain. It's our responsibility to go find certainty. And that's why I did the work on my other market, to find out where we are overvalued. So yet where do I believe the bottom is, so that I can equip my agents with certainty to have a conversation that says, folks, we've given back 20%. We're in the safe zone. It's time to act, because if you wait too long, you're not going to have choice anymore. And we're going to get back into bidding wars, lack of choice. Builders won't be offering the kind of incentives they are today in my market. I know in your markets, they're not having to make a lot of incentives. And yet, every market, this is why we have to know what's going on there. So let me go to one last section. Again, I'm going to have all these slides and all this for you. Then we're going to follow up with some videos and recording a video of the pricing guide. But I do want to tell you about this pricing guide as an introduction. You've probably all seen this from Shift, and Gary talks about the tale of two markets. The seller's market, everybody's in the market. And then you have a few fringe ones that were just stupid pricing at way out there, and they were out of the market. And then as the market maybe starts to come back a little bit, you've got people in the market and clearly out of the market. And then this is always the interesting one. It's the no man's land, where you have like a third of the homes are really in the market. They've taken the right steps in terms of condition, pricing, staging. And there's some that are getting a little activity and they're just not getting sold. And they're in what we call no man's land. And then there are some that just wind up out of the market. And this is a place we may get to if our consumer gets into freak out mode. We noticed in Mooresville, sales activity off 30%. So there are going to be some sellers that might be in no man's land, and we have to help them make the choice where to move. Now, what you're going to get this video on is something I call educating sellers with a talking pad. And this was from a family reunion presentation where I presented this. And this is something I developed in an extreme shifting market to help the consumer understand it. And by the way, this is done after you've gone through all your comps, maybe even shown them pictures. And, if there's any reluctance about where to price, and say, well, can I educate you a little bit on what the most, successful sellers are doing in terms of price today? And I would draw this out on a legal pad, because if I've got it in a PowerPoint or something, it feels like I'm selling. I've got it here in a PowerPoint for you as a reference so that you can have these tools. But I'm going to draw this out. And I said, well, there's three prices for every home. And then we draw out the premium, market, and wholesale. And then on the sides, I draw two vertical lines. And I said, now, at the top, you tend to solicit premium price when you're in an improving seller's market. If you're in a softening market, maybe a buyer's market, it tends to be lower. On the other fact, so the trend, and then by the way, what determines where we price your home is the trend, which way is it moving, and your tolerance for risk to maybe not get it sold if we miss it. And then on the other side, condition and timing, condition is like a model home or it's got neglect and deferred maintenance on the other end is going to influence part of where we price it as well. And also the timing you have. And so, and then I'm going to go through, and based upon what we looked at, I said, now here's the range I believe that really fits based upon everything we looked at. There is some justification that 320 would be a reach, and yet there's some justification for it. So I don't want to tell you that it's not there. It's there. And yet, the market right now feels like market price to really make sure that you're out of here in 60 days like you want to be, so that you're in Tulsa. It feels like 300. Now, where we decide to price your home today depends a lot on these factors. Now, the trend, you've probably been paying attention to the market. You feel like we're in a softening market or an improving market. And by the way, they're going to, in this market, they may not know. They hear conflicting stories and say, well, here's the thing. We're still in a seller's market. So we're kind of, if we think about the trend, we're in a seller's market, in a good market, and yet it's moving towards the middle. So the trend is backing up a little bit. In fact, there was another line up here, 8 months ago that I would call unicorn. This is when everybody was paying stupid money for houses. That would have been a unicorn market. And here's the interesting thing. Most sellers in a seller's market will pick right here. And I'll say, some sellers go right to market, sometimes even a little below if they're in a hurry to get sold, because they know that we'll create an auction-like atmosphere, likely get multiple offers that'll push it up. And then if in a buyer's market, well, you always hear Gary say, get ahead of the market. So We talk about the trend, and maybe we need to get ahead of it a little bit because that sales activity is the past, and we're trending, softening, we're trending down, and maybe their condition is a little less than desirable. And then if there's an extreme shifting market and they're reluctant to price right, I draw a dotted line here and I said, you know what this line represents? And they won't know. And I'll say, well, that's future premium. And that means this is what? Future market. And that means this is future wholesale. And I'll say, you remember that Hasbro toy called a Slinky? It's kind of like that. I mean, if you were chasing a Slinky down the stairs and you wanted to stop it, if you're reaching down from behind it, you're going to crash down the stairs. If you really want to stop the Slinky, you've got to get out in front of it. So that's a presentation that I'm going to send you a video of. It's worked for me extremely well to get the right price from the very beginning, because it's getting them focused on the factors that influence price. And they actually wind up making the choice. And when you watch that video, it'll be really clear. All right, a couple of things to wrap up here, folks. Let's go through what we touched on. Remember the trust triangle. And I've got some downloads for you here in just a second. You're going to have a link in the chat in just a moment, along with some QR codes. So if you need to get your camera ready, you'll be able to download the consulting guide and some resources. And then we're going to send you some follow-ups via email from us as well. So remember that our journey is this. We've got to deliver on the logic piece. We've got to deliver the empathy and the authenticity so that we build that trust relationship. I'm not going to say that we build it, we earn it. We build that trust and earn that trust relationship. And so where we went today is we talked about getting intentional about building trust with our database, providing clients with the certainty they're lacking in today's market. And that becomes something where we have to have it. And by the way, this means we have to slow down to speed up, study the market, study the trends. You know, this consulting guide, I update every month as things change. I make sure it's relevant. And because every kitchen table meeting matters right now. The more I can get people off the fence and get them moving, every one matters. And so get your messages and MOFIRS dialed in. Dial in your pricing conversation so that you're not one of the many that are doing price reductions, and you get people, moving quicker. And then you got to communicate your message to everyone. Now, when it comes to communicating the message, now we've got First Step to Bold coming up on April 4th there in Mooresville. And in fact, you've got a QR code. If you're not signed up for the free First Step to Bold, please scan the QR code right now and sign up for the free First Step to Bold. Megan, if you'll put the links in the chat too, in case somebody's on a phone and they can't access the QR code. And then also you have a link to a Google Drive where you have the presentation guide and some resources for you there. And again, you do have it in PowerPoint too, if you want to take some of it and start playing with it. It's there for you to put to use. So let's hear a few insights from our time today. What did you take away? Give me a couple of ahas. I'll leave the QR codes up so you can grab that.
I love that podcast, that Gary's favorite, to be able to share that with clients. It just, again, it's us providing value. Hey, don't take my word for it. Listen to this guy, or whatever. Just validates us in the market.
Absolutely. Thank you. What else?
I like the interest, how you said always ask, where they're at with the interest rates, because they may have bought their first house at 18% and think, wow, we're still great. So just asking the questions and not just leading with what we think they want to know.
Boy, that's a big one right there, right? It just is, my first, I don't know if anybody can beat me. My first one was 13.5%. And, so I'd look at this and I'm going, tubula boobula would be Gary's famous saying, right? Tubula boobula, who cares? And yet we get conditioned to the way things are. And we get conditioned too. I had one of my best agents in one of my market centers. We're having these conversations, but she goes, well, don't you think that was that era and this is this era? I said, no, this era is just like that area. We have an inflation issue. We had an inflation issue then. We just haven't had an inflation issue, up to this point. So we got conditioned to this is what the world without, inflation pressures looks like. We're not in that time anymore. And it's going to take a while for our economy to work through that. And by the way, inflation means that the cost of materials on housing, the things they buy to put in their house all goes up. It's a lock in your real estate world or near real estate cost right now, because rents are going to go up. Supplies for building homes are going up. Labor shortages are driving labor up to build. Yeah. All right. One more aha. Who's got the last thing? And then when we're done, I'll put the QR codes back up just in case anybody missed it. All right, so here's the deal, guys. I trust I'm going to see all of y'all at First Step to Bold. We're going to continue this conversation. And what we're going to do is we're going to take action on your message. And we are in that room at First Step to Bold. We're going to convert people to the kitchen table with some powerful messages that match your market and the right MOFIR that says, hey, I do want to sit down and have a conversation. I'm at least curious. And so if you're ready to get to more kitchen tables, please join me on April 4th. Let's get in that room together, and we're going to learn how to get our message out. And we're going to go through some very easy ways, whether it's text, social, or conversations, to start having different kind of conversations with the people that we have in our pipeline, the people we have influence with. So I trust I'll see you there. Any questions? I'll stay on just a second. Otherwise, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. I trust you got some value and some things that you'll put to use, and start really thinking critically about what is my message? What is my MOFIR? Where do I get certainty right now so that I can be that person for the people that I serve? So thank you all. Thank you so much, folks. I'll see y'all in a week and a half. Let's see, we got something in the chat here. Let me check this. I'll put my eyes on here. Okay, so Dawn said, need to know the exact dates for the program. So Dawn, we got First Step on the 4th, and then we'll be every Tuesday following that for a total of 7 weeks, including the 4th. So it'll be every single Tuesday. We do have a webinar on Fridays for somebody that misses one. So if you've got a vacation or something in there, and you're going to miss one, maybe, 2, and you want to be able to catch up online, we've got that opportunity for a little catch-up session, if you will. All right, Bruce, thanks for being there. You're welcome, Dawn. Hey, thank you, folks. We'll see you. Can we get the info of this session without using the QR code? Asked Janet. Yeah, we're going to email it all to you. So everybody that was on here is going to get an email from us. So just the email you registered with is going to be the one that we send it to. So look for that later today. We'll send you a recording of the session. We'll send you, might even send you a bonus goodie or two. So be on the lookout. We'll also have the link there for First Step to Bold and Full Bold. So if you know you're going to go the Full Bold journey, this is the time. I don't want you to be one of those 330,000 people to get out of the business. This is the time to take a stand, and I'm here to take a stand with you and have us navigate this at a high level. All right, we'll see you, folks.